with Synnex on the Red Hat engineering team. So basically, my background is a systems. I was a former systems engineer at IBM. I've always worked in the enterprise software group. So enterprise-wide software solutions and all that entails is something that I've been involved in for my entire career. They say you're never supposed to mention something that you're not prepared to talk about in depth, but I'm going to break that rule and say my last gig at IBM was I was a security systems engineer for Tivoli, identity and access management and such. So it has been significantly a while that, don't ask me anything, but, like I said, I've opened that can of worms. If you do have a question, I can always figure it out. So I'm glad, to be talking about security because it has morphed so much since I was last involved in it. What can I say? I live in Greenville, South Carolina. Synnex. We work for Synnex as a distributor, as far as that goes, and do a lot for people like Evelyn and her customers, of which some of you may be. Full disclosure, just like everyone else, I'm working from home. I have two little dogs that are not with me, but I do have a 90-pound Shepherd Malinois mix, who I am babysitting, is my grand dog, and I apologize up front if he ever gets going. That's it. I guess, Chris, you want to?
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, everybody, I'm Chris Reed. I'm the design sales engineer or field sales engineer, whatever way you want to call it. Strictly, I focus on everything related to Red Hat. So if you know a little bit about Red Hat, we communicate in predominantly open source projects. So a lot of you have probably already used them. If you CentOS, Fedora, just a little a little disclaimer here. While we do and are security minded, we are not a security product, but we do play with security products. And Jonathan's going to go through a little bit about Ansible orchestration with SOAR. So without that, I guess I'll hand it back to you, Jonathan. And if you guys have any questions as well, feel free to interrupt and ask. It's always nicer to be talking with you instead of talking at you, right? So feel free
Absolutely.
at any time to interrupt us as well. We can utilize the chat.
Yep. So very quickly, and are you seeing the one big screen, Chris?
Yes, sir. A lot of red.
A lot of red. So I apologize. Not my slides. I literally came across this presentation, at the last minute and something, and I was like, wow. I fell in love with it, and I hope I can share that love. So, not sure how many people on here. This is going to be not so much about Ansible. However, the Ansible automation platform, you can ask questions about that. Anything Red Hat is open today. But the Ansible, where the Ansible automation platform fits in the security orchestration, automation, and remediation, SOAR, which is something that I would imagine, this being a security group, is near and dear to a lot of hearts. So let's kick it out. Let me find where I got to go here. All right, so today you're going to have probably the quickest Ansible introduction and overview that I've ever done. Okay, we'll talk a little bit about the state of the security market, automation becoming the bridge or the lingua franca of IT security, SOAR itself, why Ansible, and what available Ansible integrations there are currently, as far as that goes. Again, the presentation itself gets into some of the features and functionalities of Ansible, but not very deeply, mainly as they pertain to the security piece itself. So we'll be happy, Chris and I, again, ask any questions. We'll be happy to augment that in any way we can. So what is automation? Automation happens when one of us sitting here meets a problem that we never want to solve again. That could be something, something as simple as spinning up a VMware for the DevOps team, or what happens is there's got to be a better way for me to do my security network patches and upgrades. IT operations and network operations are big proponents of things Ansible, because Ansible is the premier automation platform for what it does on the market today. So what exactly is it? It's comprised of many things, but when you break it right down, the reason that you hear so much about Ansible and people rave about it and its popularity is what I like to call its complex simplicity. Okay, there's literally nothing that you can't automate with Ansible, and you can feel free to take me to task on that. But it's simple automation language, and it perfectly describes an IT application infrastructure through the use of an Ansible playbook. So what is a playbook? All right, so if we want to use a football analogy, there's a set. A playbook is nothing more than a set of prescribed instructions that at the end result, hopefully in a significant gain for the offense, but the defense has playbooks too. It could also, a positive could be a significant loss as far as that goes. But the ability to take mundane, repetitive tasks and other things and orchestrate them in a playbook using a language called YAML, which is a very easy to learn and understand upfront language. It's also an automation engine. Okay, the engine is what runs these playbooks that you've written. And the engine is a command line interface, excuse me, where you would construct your playbooks. And playbooks, like I said, are made up of tasks, and tasks execute modules, and modules are basically the pieces that interact with whatever the back-end system or is going to be. There is also a GUI component to it, and that's the Ansible Tower. The Tower is that on-the-glass framework that allows you to do and accomplish certain things. For starters, it allows you to secure your playbooks. It's where you're going to assign roles. It's where you're going to do role-based access control. It's where you're going to give credentials to people, places, and things. It's got a very rich UI and a RESTful API. So it's stateful, and it's stateful in that these are where you'll see your logs. These are where you'll be able to go to troubleshoot. Previously, before I would say sometime last year, the GUI interface and the UI, the tower, were separate. Were available separately. They are now part of one Ansible automation platform. So you get them both at the same time. Chris, anything you want to add at this point?
Oh, I do.
I've had it.
One thing to talk about here and to kind of boil it down, Ansible is the most widely used automation platform, predominantly because it's open source. So that means that it can be used free of charge. There is a paid rendition, of course, if you're not using AWX or Ansible Tower, or if you want something that's supported. There are even certified platforms. Some of these SOAR platforms that we're going to go over are actually certified. So that means there's modules in them, and they're certified both on the Ansible portion and on the SOAR portion, right? That also means that there's a lot of open source stuff out there. So for example, if you have a problem that you're trying to automate, someone's already done it and you can go find it, and it's easily adaptable in. Especially because everything is written in what we call YAML, or a simple automation language. You can see, identify, and change things rather quickly. And it just helps when you're trying to actually adopt some code in where you can actually visualize it and see it, and you don't need to know where your mustache brackets go, how your indentation works appropriately. When you're just trying to fight with the format, it's not very helpful.
Right.
Another thing to note here is YAML is one of the most, or Ansible is one of the most widely used platforms apart from the actual Ansible. So YAML is actually used in other places. So if you're using Terraform, if you're using Cloud Init in Azure GCP, or EC2, Amazon, sorry, I missed that one, right? It's actually used during the initiation portion within these clouds. And another one that you're starting to see is Terraform and containers. So if any of you are familiar with this word called containers, Ansible or the YAML is actually used for the output and input to automate these container build outs. So a good thing, and you can go ahead and get a jump start into some of these applications just simply by learning Ansible. Without that, Jonathan, don't mean to hold us up too long here. I'll hand it back to you.
It's all good. Thank you. Good call outs. So, and by the way, this would be a good time to put in Evelyn and, people who are here today. If you would like to have just an exclusive Ansible session, we offer that in many forms and flavors. So keep in mind, we'd be happy to come back, provided we get invited back after I'm through today, right? And present that to you. So three things. Ansible is simple, it's powerful, and it's agentless. As Chris has already, and I've already said, it's human readable automation. So you call things exactly what they are. If you're writing a playbook whose function is to apply Cisco's most recent security patches, that's something that anybody throughout the organization has the ability to read, consume, and understand. So very important. Everybody's going to know, everybody who looks at your playbook is going to at least have an idea of what its function is. You do not need any special coding skills. The tasks themselves, very simply, they're executed in order. So first, second, third, however many tasks. So it allows you to get productive quickly. And I guess when I put this on there today, this wasn't part of the original slide. I guess the Y was hiding somewhere, so I apologize for that. It is powerful. It can serve purposes in application deployment. It did get its life as a configuration management tool, and as you'll see, has become so much more. The power of the workflow orchestration. So, when we talk about enterprise companies like the places that we work in silos, people are already automating in and of their own, but that's the automation piece. But orchestration, if you think of a symphony, a piece of music is beautiful to listen to a violin soloist, but when the entire orchestra chimes in, that's when things really get, exciting, and that's when the whole thing comes out. And it's not unlike what happens in what we do. If we're automating in place in our own little silos, well, gee, that's great. But when we orchestrate and we share that across the enterprise, that's when productivity, that's when things really start to happen. And lastly, it's agentless. It has an agentless architecture where you do not have to install anything on any of your endpoints. All right. If you're a Linux shop, you communicate through OpenSSH, and if you're a Windows shop, you communicate through WinRM. And for those people who are Windows shops and may not be embracing a lot of open source, please do keep in mind that this is just not limited to Linux. There's tons of functionality across, like I said, across many platforms. So it's more efficient, it's more secure. Chris?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have to call out the typo that's in here because other people are going to see it. So get productive quickle.
Thanks, Seth. I already did that, but thanks again.
Oh, I missed that portion. I'm sorry. Just adding on to it here. So Ansible, a little bit of history, was initially set up as a CMS or configuration management software. And the way that it's grown is it's been adopted into application, CI/CD, workflow. But when we talk about Ansible, the best thing to think of it is automation from end to end. So that means you can create things like automating user creation. You can automate, security remediation. And later today, when we go through some of the SOAR stuff, you'll see that it can actually help with the automation or workflow of a SOAR, essentially, application or lifecycle or remediation of any form. Another thing to think of here is Jonathan already talked on the agent list, the fact that it can use SSH, right? We already know as a secure protocol. It can use WinRM as well. But one of the big strong suits here, apart from that, is it can communicate straight with an API. So we're API friendly. So if you need to submit something via URI, you absolutely can submit it that way as well. And there's plugins that even allow you to integrate with other applications as well. So if you need to send something out like 2FA, Ansible does work with two-factor authentication. Back to you, sir.
Yes, sir. So in summary, what can I do with Ansible? Automate the deployment and management of your entire IT footprint. All of that, you can do all of that on all of these things down here, and really so much more as far as that goes. So let's dive into, let's start talking about the security piece. And before I do that, any questions?
Hey, one question that I have.
Sure.
I'll tell you what, I'll hold on to that until SOAR has gone over, because I have like this nagging SOAR question, but I'll hold on to that. But one thing that I was kind of impressed by was that Ansible is not just limited to Linux. I don't want to speak for anybody else, but I'm a person that has spent 17 years, running Windows, running network infrastructure, Cisco devices, Palo Alto devices, that kind of thing. I thought it was interesting to hear Red Hat speak through the fact that Ansible can be leveraged with non-Linux environments.
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, Microsoft's one of their biggest customers. And just before everything shut down, when we went to Ansible Fest, they had standing room only presentations where they talked about how their adoption of Ansible turned their network engineers into network developers, because it allowed them to it did what it said it would do, allowed them to free up so many intelligent resources to go and do amazing things. So yeah, it's good. It's good in that realm.
Yeah, just
so go ahead. I'm sorry, Chris.
Yeah, just going to add on to that. So yeah, absolutely. Predominantly like Checkpoint, Palo Alto as well. They have joint security modules, so that they have certified content between the two companies. So you can actually call Red Hat for assistance on it, or you can call Checkpoint to actually get assistance on it if you need help navigating through some of the modules, playbooks, roles, so on and so forth. And they'll actually assist you throughout the process.
Yep. So let's talk about why Ansible is expanding into the security space, the reasons behind it, and again, what are the problems that the Ansible automation platform can solve? So there's plenty of security vendors out there. All right, each one of them has a multiplicity of solutions and that claim to solve very specific security problems. Some of them actually do that. But enterprise large organizations are investing more money, into those solutions, and that's good. But it's not uncommon to end up with 20 to 50 different products implemented across very many different categories. So you can already start to see, you may even have this in your own shop right now, so you could start to see, the challenges there of how you manage most of these. And of course, they're security products. Most of them produce alerts, most of them produce events, okay? And security teams, depending on how you set these tools up, can easily become overwhelmed. And it's estimated that they're really only able to handle 5% of everything that comes across. So you guys all have, I'm presuming at this point, security background. So 5%, that's really not that bad if you're really super efficient in how you deal with it. But despite all those solutions and the money, the time to investigate and resolve all these incidents has increased, because that's the landscape that we're in right now. And look at the severity, look at the severity of the attacks that have been propagated. I'm thinking most recently, the one that just occurred most recently. I mean, who would have thought it? Microsoft took a big hit, and I watched something or a special the other day that said really the only way to ensure that everything is purged from the system is to start from scratch. And, nobody can afford to do that. But the scale and the complexity of the infrastructure, that needs to be protected nowadays, in combination with the speed, the speed of the attacks, gives us the requirement to have a technology to support, the human element as far as that goes, and the remediation of some of these things. So we also know there's lack of integration between many of the tools that I've talked about. So if you think about 20 to 50 products in a large organization, you've got to manage a lot of this stuff manually. You've got to jump between all the different UIs, different skill sets, different levels, different experts, people, unfortunately, maybe not speaking, wanting to speak the same language. We all have the same idea when it comes to the security, but the language might be different in how things are handled. So if you think about what people are asked, the first ranked issue in security is lack of skilled staff. Okay, which is certainly true, but diminishing, the point of diminishing returns. Sometimes throwing more resources or more people is not the solution to the problem. As a matter of fact, it can actually add to that problem, to the bottom line of the issues that we're having. So automation itself can become that bridge, that lingua franca, if you will, of IT security, but you first need, it needs to be much simpler. It has to be embraced broadly by not only the enterprise, but more importantly, the entire industry. So Ansible Security Automation is Red Hat's effort to offer Ansible as the default automation language to integrate and operate across all the different security technologies that an enterprise has, and that an enterprise has implemented, obviously, to protect infrastructure. Security automation is Ansible's expansion deeper into the security use case. So we've already given you an overview of what Ansible Automation Platform is. So depending on the team of the person that you're talking to, automation in the security space means a lot of different things to a lot of different people and can be applied in a lot of different areas. It could be investigation. It could be threat mitigation. It could be threat mediation. It could be hardening. It could just be going out and checking for compliance. So everybody doing security has his or her own niche, perhaps, or their own thought about what they're, what is important to them or what their actual function is. So the goal of Ansible automation is, as far as security here, is the automation and the orchestration of the security response itself. The goal is to target security responses and operation teams, provide them a more efficient, in a streamlined way to automate their processes for the identification and the response to be able to do that. In other words, what we want to try and do is use Ansible to stitch together all the different tools as part of those processes. So Chris said this early on. I was supposed to reiterate it, and I didn't. Red Hat is not a security solution. It's not a security vendor, okay? And we're not turning into a security vendor. What we do is offer you the tools to better leverage the solutions that you already have in-house without, like Chris likes to say things, without throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Trying to give you an opportunity to complement, definitely not to rip and replace. And that's the reason that Red Hat's expanded Ansible's footprint in this area, because it saw a whole range of problems that it can solve.
I'd go back real quick if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely.
I just wanted to, because I know somebody will probably call me out on this. It says Red Hat will not become a security vendor, but we want to become a security enabler. So we did, if you are familiar with Red Hat, we did purchase a container security solution. So there's some misnomer there a little bit, but we are looking at adding and incorporating, but we are not a security solution as of today. But back to you. Sorry about that.
Nope, and that's okay. And by the way, again, the group's small enough, and Chris, I like to, once I get going, so if do not hesitate to hold me up a little bit and say, hold on, I got a question. We want to answer those as well. So Red Hat's not the only one who came to this conclusion. You know, several years ago, a completely new category, security orchestration, automation, and response, was born and, you know, was created. Gartner calls it SOAR. Forrester calls it SAO, security automation and orchestration. So for many years, there's always been a almost a religious fervor as to whether you go with Gartner or you go with Forrester, as far as that goes. So I won't get into the middle of that, but you know, I guess the point here is they all both had to put their own separate spin on virtually the same thing. So,
Jonathan,
yes,
sorry, can I interrupt you real quick?
yeah,
We got a good question here, and I'm going to ask it. So give me 1 second. So I'm
Sure.
teaching the first two Red Hat classes, the RH124 and RH134. And students are a little overwhelmed with having to learn a new OS when things are so easy in Windows. Can you give a little pitch on how having that knowledge feeds into obtaining the Ansible skills? Sure. And I guess I'll take this one if that's okay. And you
I
can
thought you
add
were,
on.
but I can. Go ahead.
I can. So yeah, it's absolutely a good question here. Like, how does learning Linux help me with Ansible? So I will say this: you don't need to know Linux to know Ansible, predominantly, but it is important when working with items to understand the expected result before you try automating it. So in saying that, with like Linux, predominantly a lot of your automation tasks can be completed via Linux and via Ansible. So understanding what the outlying character or result should be will help you with Ansible. As well, when we start moving over to bigger tasks like CI/CD, we're actually creating applications and deploying them. Predominantly most of the applications, because there's such a vast open source toolkit, is created within Linux. For example, web pages, predominantly 95% of web pages are created in Linux. And the reason for that is the amount of availability and flexibility for us in there is a lot greater than Windows IIS could ever be. So when you're running an Ansible playbook, you would need to know how to integrate that technology to create the server that you want to be able to apply it to an Ansible playbook, right? Because if you don't know how to do it via Linux, doing it with a playbook is not always the best option, because then you'll never know how it works or how to troubleshoot it or how to even believe that it's a source of truth, right? I don't know if you wanted to add on to that, Jordan or Jonathan. Sorry.
Nope, that's got it.
Did that help, Mike, at all? Perfect. Yeah. I mean, Linux is a great thing to learn because of the flexibility included in it, right? I use Linux in my house, and while Windows could do it, for example, the Windows containers are down to what, 10 gigs, and a Linux container is a few hundred megs. So
yeah. And
back
please,
to you. I'm trying to get off my soapbox, but
no, that's quite. You know, listen, testify. Go right ahead.
I don't want to say this. I don't want to say this very loud, but this is going to be. I guess this is going to be on YouTube, so people are going to hear this. You know, I'll say. You know, I've built this career in IT infrastructure, but you know, I've largely avoided Linux. I run it on a couple of test machines, like a lot of people. But I'll just say this for Mike and for you know, our presenters. I have found that I'm getting closer and closer to actually running it with operational workloads. So this is helping gain my confidence.
Hey,
That's
and
excellent.
I have a secret for you guys. Mike is actually my Linux professor. I haven't taken his class yet. So if he can actually teach me, everybody else should be able to,
Yeah.
do it too.
Right. Well, we can, and there are, so you specifically mentioned RH 124 and 134. So, you know, talk to Evelyn at some point if you're, there are things like Red Hat Learning, RHLS, Red Hat Learning subscriptions. All right. And they enable you to take as much and anything as you want for a year. You can buy them individually or nationwide, excuse me, or enterprise wide, depending on where you're working and what wants to happen. So please do check, with Evelyn, and if she has any questions, she can follow up with us and we can clear that out for you. But yeah, there's a lot of good learning that's out there. And I'm glad. I'm glad to hear. Listen, I grew up my first version when I got on computers, I started with DOS, and then my first exposure to Windows was 1.1. So to give you an idea how long I've been kicking around, and I definitely see there's advantages to things both ways. But getting back on track, so SOAR is basically security business process orchestrators. The scope of teams where this methodology is applied is not limited to just, SIEM operators or SOC analysts. This can include, alert and or triage management, incident responders, threat intelligence, compliance managers, threat hunters, etc. You can see that security SOAR is an emerging market. It's got a huge growing popularity. If you just look at some of the SOAR vendors that are out there and who acquired them, as far as that goes. So, proposed use cases for SOAR literally include everything from the automation of rote SOC tasks to the streamlining of niche and complex workflows. So the landscape is definitely changing. And, we sell Palo Alto at Synnex. We deal with Palo Alto. We deal with Microsoft. Obviously, Red Hat was just bought by IBM for $34 billion. We also deal with Splunk. So, if we can, again, get with Evelyn, if you ever need some help, we can certainly find a way to, to augment what you're doing. And, it's not just Gartner and Forrester that are telling this too. This just, thrown in here, this is a KPMG and Oracle survey as to, the level of commitment and, what people are doing when it comes to SOAR and such solutions, and where they're giving their, they're putting their efforts towards. So how does Ansible security automation relate to SOAR? So we're not competing in the space. I want to stress that. On the contrary, the SOAR ISVs are targets. There are targets within targets to integrate with the Ansible automation platform, and our targets are to get their partners to develop more content to support Ansible security automation. Remember, Ansible is an is an automation tool. We can automate certain processes. What we need from the ISVs are those modules, are those tools, are those ways, to go ahead and allow Ansible to do exactly what it does, which is automate these solutions. And take certain tasks off of y'all. It can be Ansible can be consumed side by side with SOAR built automation engines and where they're present, and extend the reach of those based on the modules that are available. So how does Ansible security automation relate to SOAR? So the reason that there's synergy instead of composition is the difference in the level that each platform provides its value in. SOAR's values in the orchestration of high-level security processes and orchestration that involves people. Ansible automation platform, its job is to coordinate multiple technologies at a lower level, giving simple interoperability, through a simple language, through consistent integration layers across all content initiatives, security, network, infrastructure, etc. One of the slides that I didn't put up, but I talked about the different silos. Everybody's automating, okay, but they're doing it individually. It's that organic growth and that orchestration, where we want to bring things out to the enterprise and get out of our silos. So that's where Ansible sits in all this.
Yeah. Real quick.
Oh yeah, go right ahead. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. Just what it looks like is a task may be triggered by the SOAR, and then the remediation, or if a ticket's created, could go out. Ansible could, log the ticket, create an event, or remediate the issue, whether that be a CVE or something to that effect. It gets logged, the ticket gets closed out, and it goes back to the store to mark the issue resolved. So altogether, what it can do is help automate and remediate and log any of the issues. So it's just there to help work with the SOAR, right?
Yep.
Perfect. Back to you, sir.
So just an example of some automation and integration. It doesn't always mean command and control of the other products or technologies. The platform and the Ansible automation platform can be, and I'm just going to knock that down to Ansible, if it's okay, if I could stand to say a few less words. So Ansible can be integrated into other class of security technologies, and now switching into remediation, getting away from switching into remediation, like IBM's Resilient or Phantom by Splunk. So the value of remediation platforms is the ability to design and orchestrate, high-level security processes that basically, so this is the who does what and when. And what Ansible does is extend their automation those solutions automation capabilities, allowing them, to reach parts of an infrastructure which aren't traditionally under the purview of security. For instance, a network appliance or operating systems, providing a complementary integration layer or something like that. Thanks to the Ansible language, this is now easier to maintain and customize. You want to expand on that, Chris? Just maybe talk for a minute about how Ansible, put in how Ansible would do that.
Which portion specifically did you want to
I
hear?
was just going to say the language, just basically the language, the language itself being, maybe an example of what makes it easier to maintain and customize at a high level, what that would look like, maybe a playbook or kicking something off.
Yeah. So Ansible can automatically do the automation, and a lot of these companies already have the technology to integrate to it directly to actually kick off the playbook. So for example, if I'm to give you a product that we use, it's not SOAR, but for like CI/CD, we can create a pipeline and then kick off the Ansible portion. It can integrate to a lot of these already, but if you need a module or anything, they can be easily pulled down from the actual Ansible automation hub and utilized or connected and hooked in here.
Good. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, and absolutely.
So why use Ansible with SOAR? So how do customers usually adopt security automation? They do it through three basic methodologies. One is the opportunistic. So when approaching an automation project at the opportunistic stage, most common goals are standardizing security tasks, streamlining the actions taken on similar groups of devices or technologies. Very important, reducing time to task, automating those last mile processes that pretty much are performed manually at this point across many different products from those many different vendors. So standardization and time savings. So in the opportunistic scenario, Ansible offers, this is where YAML is so important as a tool, because again, as I said early on, as Chris and I both said early on, it's a tool that is used to easily describe these processes, and literally anybody, we can open up a playbook right now and everybody here could not only read it, but tell us what it's doing at that point because of the utilization of YAML. And that's a great way to get things standardized is the word I was looking for. There's the systematic approach. So standardizing security operations, aggregating last mile processes in higher level, what we're calling higher level workflows, getting all the relevant teams involved. So now now we have that system. We're systematic. Things are going to happen. Routines, workbooks, workflows are going to kick off playbooks that are going to give us some expected results. And then a centralized response process, assigning roles and responsibilities to different groups of people as part of an integrated process. And right here, if you've not seen it, is where Tower comes in, because it's through Ansible Tower that you can integrate multiple security teams, help them work more collaboratively with enterprise features like centralized access to the entire library of response workflows, role-based access control. So the Tower offers the ability, like I said, you can connect people, places, manage credentials for not just people, but places and things, IoT as well. It offers that ability to connect to multiple playbooks by different people in structured and conditional workflows that reflect the higher level security processes. And Chris, can I imagine that you might want to talk a little bit more about workflows in Tower?
Yeah, sure. We can do workflows. Kind of a little bit like we were talking before. It just helps you integrate into essentially a bunch of playbooks together. So if you need a playbook on the Ansible portion to integrate with ServiceNow, that can be part of a workflow. If you need approval process for remediating some of that could be done through an Ansible workflow. So these are all things that can be done throughout a workflow. You can have multiple approvals. So for example, if you're making firewall changes, if you're applying patches to a production workload, these could actually go out via text message, email, looking for an approval at the endpoint, right? So if we're going to block like port 80 for all production web servers, right, that would need an approval process before it would continue and lock that down to the time being.
Very good. Thank you, sir. So, excuse me. And then the last phase is the institutionalized phase. Okay, and the institutionalized phase is basically, how do I describe it? Yeah, perhaps security organizations have created a security operations program, like an incident response program, and playbooks to be executed in that program. So then if you've already gotten to that level, you can aim to hit these last set of goals, which is automating security processes. You create workflows which help support end-to-end security processes and programmatically operate across the security tools with minimal manual intervention. That means you've automated, you've reached nirvana, and you've automated those mundane tasks. Okay, you can integrate the security in the IT portfolio as well, ensuring something like, I don't know, more consistent and stable way to perform your remediation tasks through command and control of a wide variety of the security technologies that you might have place in your shop. So essentially, this is the stage where security teams approach remediation. Okay, tools. They use their remediation tools to design and orchestrate the higher level workflows for things like SIEMs. And Ansible can be integrated into these tools to just basically extend those capabilities, like you saw a couple of diagrams back. And like Chris says, you use your tools to create, whatever processes you have, and you automate their functionality by leveraging Ansible and Tower and scheduling them to go on and off at certain times, and have that sense of that warm fuzzy feeling that things are going well in the background, and freeing yourselves up to do more important things, perhaps more productive things. So I've been rambling on a bit. Any questions? I'm looking at the slides, so I'm not looking at the chat. If you're asking anything in the chat, Chris and/or Evelyn, just call that out. We don't want to miss anybody.
Yes, sir. Nothing new in there as of right now.
All right.
Feel free.
So we already talked about institutionalized, so I'm sorry about that. Comprehensive processes should span all areas outside the traditional purview or purvey of security teams. Large organizations, unfortunately, not the least which where I work, tend to still be siloed, and that, you know, we still have those issues where that creates cultural and technical friction. My security can beat up your security, and my systems engineers are better than your systems engineers. But especially, when you have a cross portfolio of integrations, okay? So, and the challenge with that is, for example, you've got a lack of a common language, you have a lack of transparency, you have a lack of common tools, et cetera. So those are some of the challenges that have always been faced and are still being faced. Remember, it wasn't too long ago where each business unit had their own CIO or C-level executive that ran the infrastructure for that, for that business. And, everyone was, you wouldn't even deign to mention, why don't we combine them all into one so we can save a little money and move on to, and invest elsewhere. So why Ansible and SOAR? So as you can see on the slide, the Ansible platform is that common ground. Well, it could be that common ground. I believe it is that common ground. I've drank a little bit more of the Kool-Aid, and that will bring all the IT teams together in the organization that need to be part of the extended security workflows. IT ops, net ops, as I've said earlier, are massively using Ansible in combination. And this being that you might even have it in some of your organizations, and Ansible tends to grow very organically and quickly. So if you're in that situation in combination with the transparency brought by the language, there are no secrets. We all know what we all positively know what everyone else is doing. So Ansible really helps and facilitates that cross-team collaboration, and can get a lot more value, help you get a lot more value from the automation assets that you've created different use cases for. Most SOAR vendors reached a tipping point where maintaining hundreds of integrations on their own is just completely unsustainable. Okay, this affects the value of those integration. It diminishes their capabilities, and then they got to kind of you got to kind of force them to standardize, and that affects their stability and ultimately their user experience. So continuing on with the Ansible Ansible network automation, and now with this security automation initiative, Red Hat's basically showing the ability to get ISVs together that are competing against each other and have them produce content as part of the same community. And I'll just do a little aside here. Open source is all about community. That's what makes it so successful. Not about the community that, oh, do I really want to, should I use something that I've seen in a, in an open source community because it may or may not be enterprise ready. That's a different, that's a different conversation. We're getting these where, Red Hat through this initiative is getting the ISVs to have active ecosystems that give stability of the integrations and alignment, with platform releases, preserving the platform's unique secret sauce. Because, the certified content is of great value to both security organizations and these ISVs, ensuring support, ensuring support for what they're putting out. So essentially what I'm saying here is if your solution has its own secret, has its own secret sauce, and there are integrations and maybe they're playing with it, they're working together, with other solutions to develop. It's very possible to make them complementary and allow them, to work together without giving away, giving away that secret sauce. Okay. And that community allows those things to be, the key there is supportable. And you'll see a lot of what is available in the Ansible community by way of roles, by way of playbooks, by way of people who have done things before you. The best of the best, the cream rises to the top, and those things become supported, by Red Hat. So it's a safe bet to do it, and it's a good way to move forward. So SOAR has lots of issues, like lots of lots of other technologies out there. They just seem concentrated on the integration and automation layer, which is not where their secret sauce lives. Security professionals, for the most part, don't have, no disrespect, a lot of coding skills. And professional services aren't particularly attractive, when you have to use them every time you need to customize something. So think about that. You may be, you may have a good background in coding, but my memories are, the security professionals were very good that I dealt with in my time, and they understood the technologies and how to put that together. But it's like, well, let's go ahead. They didn't really have the wherewithal, the ability. It wasn't their focus to go ahead and build something or modify something or change something. So you got to go ahead and call in, services to do that. Well, that gets expensive when you need to do it, every single time. The Ansible platform, again, helps to solve these problems because of the simplicity of the language. Security teams can create their own content or easily customized content provided by the SOAR ISVs or other partners, without being coders or domain experts or for each and every one of the technologies they want to integrate. So if you get this sense of community going and you get what we've, Chris and I have referred to as these modules in place, then it becomes much easier, to go ahead and make those necessary changements or enhancements, on your own. So, and then if professional services need to be involved, the effort at that point is generally much more cost effective. Any questions or anything? I know I've been doing a lot of talking, and you've been great listeners, and we're home stretching it.
So I have a little bit of a question, and maybe this is a little more of an observation, but I work on a really small security team, and a lot of our, I've looked at different SOAR platforms and that kind of thing, and my observation is that the SOAR platforms, first of all, the few that I looked at were just cost prohibitive for a very small team. And we found that, at least from the perspective we looked at it, the time savings was not worth the great expense of implementing one of these big enterprise SOARs. So I guess I wanted to ask this question: Are you all seeing that more? I know we've talked about mid-market a lot, but more small to medium businesses are implementing things like SOARs, or have I just not looked at enough vendors?
That's a great question, and I'm taking a moment to mull it over. Not having delved a lot into I've been away from the SOAR side and the security side, so I could research that, but I will tell you that the communities. So let me backtrack for just a minute. So all of these solutions, Ansible, Red Hat Enterprise Linux, they all come from projects. Red Hat sponsors just about 450 individual projects that are out there. Okay, and the solutions that you eventually subscribe to or buy subscriptions for are born from these projects. Okay, so that means what you're paying for is guaranteed that what you're getting is going to work on whatever Red Hat, we say it's going to work on. All right, and if you want it 24/7, 365 support. So having said that, it could be, I'm not as familiar with the security communities, and Chris, I'll ask you here if you've got more experience with it. So long-windedly, what I'm saying is, there's a great focus on the SMB market. Okay, mid-market SMB, they're not heavily, they're not specifically delineated. There's a lot of, could be one or could be the other. So if it's not there now, there's no reason to say that it wouldn't be coming. Chris,
Sorry.
anything you want to tack on to that?
Yeah, absolutely. So SOAR started, you are pretty much right on the spot there, Jeff. It started out as a larger company movement for sure, because they needed ways to isolate and remediate larger issues, right? And to work cross-platform throughout teams. But it's grown very much so down the mid-market into the small and medium businesses. And the nice thing about like small to medium businesses are the fact that they're more nimble and more agile. But SOAR absolutely is down all the way down to the smallest of shops. And there are even open source SOAR tools now, right? You don't have to go buy the largest IBM product off the shelf and work with Ansible. There are even open source SOAR tools that can be integrated with framework like Ansible. So great question, but absolutely as of right now, you're seeing just a down the wire adoption. And pretty soon what will happen is it'll work instead of top down, it'll go bottom and top, and then we'll meet in the middle. And that's kind of what happened with Ansible as well. It was just a CMS tool that big companies were working with, essentially. And then it actually grew more so from the other side, where other small companies came in and said, hey, we think this will work better, and I think I can build this, and we think we can build this, and this is a great idea to tackle this. And Ansible actually came all the way up through the mid-market from the small to medium, and then went into the enterprise area and grew further. That's absolutely great question.
Yep.
Hey, one thing, and I hate to just throw this bit of a curveball question, but because I agree with what you said there, Christopher. As the evolution seems to be that heavy automation starts with enterprises that because they have a much higher quantity of similar work by and large, and then it eventually pushes itself down. And I'm talking about automation altogether. It pushes itself down to SMB. More broadly, one of the things that I'm thinking about is Ansible. How do different organizations use it and that kind of thing? I know we could talk for hours about that, but is there anything like a list or a set of examples or scenarios, some kind of an online resource that could point us towards, here's how Ansible can be used, and by the way, here's some example scripts that you can leverage in your environment, or you can pick apart, you can run in your home labs, whatever.
Chris,
if I can unmute myself, I can put some information in there. But predominantly, that's a hard question to answer. We do have some sample stuff, no doubt, without a doubt. But as far as to what you're targeting, if you give me an idea of what you're targeting, I can give you better information. But I can give you some generic stuff, absolutely. But because of the vastness of Ansible now, it can be utilized security, CI/CD development, JBoss integration, VMware integration, ServiceNow, ticket integration. So there's a lot of areas in which it now spreads across, but I can absolutely grab some generic stuff and throw it in there for you guys.
Yeah, that would be perfect. I don't know about other people on this call, but when I scan a list of possibilities and dig into it, my brain immediately goes to how can I make this practical in my environment or with my specific needs. So again, I'm speaking from a lot of ignorance about Ansible with that question.
Right. Well, again, and keep in mind, it's that, Ansible is the tool that enables, basically, if you look at the slide, in front of us, I mean, if the processes don't already, you can't automate what doesn't exist. Okay, and we know that certain things exist, but if they exist at that very high level, at that, you know, that top, it's that top-down approach, you know, the companies with the bigger pockets usually have the ability to do that. Eventually it will make its way down, but that's not to say that there isn't somebody, you know, maybe working from the middle down or the bottom up towards the middle, or what have you. But it's, you know, it just takes time. And, you know, again, what Chris was just saying, you know, SOAR is a top-down approach. Ansible, you know, can help from the beginning on the automation journey. You know, once the scale and complexity of automation increases, you know, Ansible brings all the components that you need to scale it and reach the maturity needed, you know, to fully adopt a, you know, a full-fledged SOAR program. I realize that speaks obviously to, you know, to the larger, to the more enterprise, the bigger enterprises, but, you know, it doesn't always happen as quickly as we want it to, but, you know, we have seen it. And like I said, between Chris and myself, we'll look and see what we can come up with. So what available SOAR integrations are there currently? So currently IBM Security published and supports 2 integrations with Ansible. One is an embedded integration, and the other connects to the Tower component. Splunk on its App Store, Splunk Phantom offers an integration with Ansible Tower, with the Ansible Tower component of Ansible. So this integration is provided and maintained, I believe, by a partner called WWT. So it's starting. You know, yes, it's at that top. You know, it's at that top-down piece, but it is starting. So this may or may not be helpful, but, and we will provide this information to you know, to Evelyn to share. And I notice Evelyn, are we still timed at 1:15?
Well, no, we really should have ended at 1.
Oh, I'm
But-
sorry. I thought we had I thought we had more time. I apologize.
But
Well,
if you
we're
want to
almost
finish
done.
your finish your thought. Thank you.
We're almost done. So here's just some relevant resources. Don't write these down. I'll make sure to share them. Okay, and you can you know, you can go and see the code and see what's out there, and hopefully you can leverage some of that information. So at this point, back to the blinding red hat glare. I just wanted to say, first of all, thank you for being so patient and asking such good questions and inviting Chris and I into your group today. And I